Was Conor Benn robbed, or did Chris Eubank Jr. deserve the win? What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Fight Franchise and our recap and review of the main event of the Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn card. This was an absolutely mega fight and one of the best fights of the decade. This lived up to all the expectations, the hype, their father's rivalry. This was one of the best boxing matches of the year so far and one of the best boxing matches of the decade. The storyline, the pageantry, the build-up, everything. There was so much that this could fall flat and not deliver. Have we seen so many big fights? But this delivered and then some. This was an amazing bout. The build-up was crazy. You know, they were supposed to fight in 2022, I believe it was. And then Conor Benn has to pull out because he pops for performance-enhancing drugs, and then he's fighting his name, and he's like, no, I didn't pop, it was a tainted supplement or something of the such, or he blamed it on eggs, really, hence why he got slapped with an egg, and they go their separate ways and whatnot. And then now they've come back together with the rivalry, and Chris Eubank Jr. is talking a lot of trash, but his father's not in his corner. He's been against his father for the last 2 years. This rivalry, the reason we're getting Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. is because Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn fought. Their fathers have such a legacy in this matchup, and why this all happened. And, you know, for one father not to be there and the other father to be there, it just made the storyline and the hype and everything a lot more different. And then the press conferences they had back and forth on Piers Morgan, the slap of the egg, everything. It just built up to a night of fights where we was going to get something crazy. Even the drama with the weigh-ins and the rehydration clause, you know, Chris Eubank Jr. is like, I'm going to make the weight. You know, Conor Benn says to him in the press conference, just lose the weight, fat boy. And then when it comes to weigh-in day, the day before, Chris Eubank Jr. weighs in at 160.05 pounds. He's missing by 0.05 pounds. Then he re-weighs in again, gets 160.002. He's 2 grams off the 160 pound limit. And he misses weight and he's fined 500k. And then that night that happens, everyone's like, oh, he's had a bad weight cut. This is going to affect him in the fight. He's going to lose. And a lot of people were changing their prediction. They were like, oh, Chris Eubank Jr. was so confident. He had this in his arsenal. He was talking all this trash. And then next thing you know, he misses weight. And then, oh, everyone's like, oh, maybe Conor Benn's got this. Maybe Conor Benn's going to steal the show. Maybe Conor Benn is going to win the fight. Off the back of that, they come into fight night and both men super confident. And it's the Liam Smith, and this is where I say the pageantry and the storyline. It was like a WrestleMania moment. It's like something we've never really had in boxing. And in combat sports, we don't get it much. But when we get it, they're amazing. It's the Liam Smith, Aaron McKenna fight, and it's like the 6th or 7th round, and Aaron McKenna put on a clinic against Liam Smith, and a car pulls up, a Rolls Royce, and I saw it pull up, and I saw Chris Eubank Jr. was in the other seat, and he got out, and this car pulls up, and out steps Chris Eubank Jr. from the other side of the car, Chris Eubank Sr. He's here, and he's with his son, and they're both walking into the arena, and it was one of the best moments in boxing this decade. It was unbelievable. A 2-year kind of strained father-son relationship. You know, you don't want that. A lot of people, you know, have a lot of admiration for their dads, and a lot of sons have their dads as their heroes. And, you know, Chris Eubank Jr.'s father is Chris Eubank Sr. He was an epic boxer, and he's followed in his footsteps. He's named after him, you know, Junior and Senior. And to see him step out, and then they kind of walk in, you know, in each other's arms, and they're like, yeah, let's go do this. We're going to go out there. I'm going to walk you out and we're going to war. And because in the build-up, he was like, I'd never go out with my son. I'm never going to be in his corner for him to, you know, change his tune and be out there. It was unreal. And then there's another WWE moment where Nigel and Conor Benn are watching on the TV in their locker room, and they see them walking in, and you see Conor Benn, he's like, okay, this is a different ball game, because I think that gave Chris Eubank Jr. a lot of confidence after the missed weight, after the palaver of that. You know, he made weight the second time, 169.5 in the rehydration clause, but it was like, okay, that gave Chris Eubank Jr. the much needed confidence he had going into this fight. And then both of them, they come out, you know, the shorts, the ring walks, mirroring their fathers and kind of living up to their legacies. It was so unreal being walked out by their fathers. It was like something we'd never seen before. Like, for those of us who I was too young to see Nigel and Chris Eubank Senior fight live. They was before my time, before I was born. I've rewatched them and stuff, but it still doesn't feel the same, when you rewatch a fight compared to live. And then seeing these two come out live, they've got like massive shoes to fill and put on the fight of the night and fight of the year like their fathers did. And I'm going to kind of go into the fight now, but both guys, come out there super confident. And early on, it seemed Conor Benn for the first 3 rounds was getting better of the exchanges. Chris Eubank was landing the more volume. He was getting behind his jab, landing the punches and whatnot. But it was Chris Eubank. He was very erratic and he was very, moving his upper body to kind of keep Eubank Jr. on his toes and guessing at what was coming next. And he was leaping in with huge hooks and huge right hands to try and catch Eubank Jr. because he wanted, as he said, he was going to knock him out early. But Chris Eubank Jr. weathers the early storm, and towards the end of the 3rd round, he starts finding his rhythm, and I'm pretty sure he lands a brilliant uppercut in the 3rd round, and the tide starts shifting where it started very good for Benn. He was having a lot of brilliant success, ripping to the body, coming up with the hooks, and just being very volume heavy and putting the pressure on. But Eubank Jr. found his jab, found his rhythm, and then going into the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, he kind of established control. I've got the kind of, punch statistics, it was always, the volume was in the favour of Eubank Jr., but it was kind of the power punches were always being thrown by Conor Benn. So the first 3 rounds, when it comes to power punches, it was 4 to 7. Conor Benn landed 4, Eubank Jr. landed 7, Conor Benn landed 6, Eubank Jr. landed 0, and then Conor Benn landed 6 and Eubank Jr. landed 2 in the 3rd round. So when it came to power punches, it was Benn who was going for it and trying to take off Eubank Jr.'s head, whereas Eubank Jr. was winning on the volume overall. When it came to volume in that round and overall punches thrown, it was 7 to 14. Benn landed 7, Eubank Jr. landed 14 in the 1st round. 10 to 16 in the 2nd for Benn and then Eubank Jr. And then 10 to 18 for Benn and Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. was trying to establish that jab and, use his kind of distance and his range to kind of beat the bigger guy at the range. And then slowly but surely, power punches, Eubank Jr. catches up and he started matching Benn for power punches and if not landing more in some of the rounds. And then rounds 4, 5, 6, 7... is where he kind of takes over the control of the fight and the momentum of the fight, and it kind of swings in his favour. A lot of those rounds from 1 to 7, you can score them either way. It's kind of debatable. And then kind of, it's like, okay, Conor Benn needs to kind of get back into the fight. It's round 8, it's a very even kind of swing round where both guys are having success and doing very well. And kind of Conor Benn and Chris Eubank he's having more success again. At first, it was Eubank Jr. who was doing very good behind his jab and using the distance very well. But then Conor Benn was coming in from the distance with these huge shots and starting to land. And he even had Eubank Jr. in a bit of trouble where he landed some huge shots and his chin was being tested, was Eubank Jr.'s. And then Eubank Jr. wasn't having as much success at that kind of distance range where they were kind of coming in and clashing in. And then all of a sudden, Eubank Jr. is like, oh crap, maybe I need to fight in a way more closer range where he can't jump in and land these hooks, and I'm going to fight on the inside very close with my head up against his head or my head up against his chest and just wing him punches in the pocket and kind of beat him on the inside so he can't generate that huge force from these hooks coming from afar, which he was having success with, was Conor Benn. So round 8, it's kind of like a swing round where Conor Benn's kind of getting back into the fight. Round 9, again, another swing round where there was a head clash, which kind of opened up a huge cut under the eye of Chris Eubank Jr. And the fight starts to shift in Conor Benn's favour when he sees the blood pouring. He's kind of landing huge on on Chris Eubank Jr.'s face, and his cheeks are starting to swell up. He's landing some massive shots. Conor Benn, he tired during, he threw out a lot of energy in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round, and then going from the 4th to the 7th, he tired a bit. coming into the 8th and 9th, he was picking up his engine. And at the point where it was round 10, Conor Benn comes out like a bat out of hell. He's throwing hell for leather. He's pushing the pace and he's trying to win this fight back. He's going for it and swinging left, right and centre. And he's just going there to try and, get this fight back in his favour and get the win. And they swing hell for leather, do they, in this round. And Conor Benn even has Eubank Jr. in hurts of trouble. I think he opens another cut, but on this side of the eye, like on the corner of the eye. So he reopens the cut from the headbutt, from the head clash. And then they're swinging back and forth like crazy. And Conor Benn is getting back into the fight. And at this point, it looked, I was trying not to score it because I just couldn't, because I was just like so engrossed in the fight. But if I was to, I think at this point, I had it 6-4 or 5-5 to Conor Benn. I think, I can't remember, but I had it very close at this point. And then round 11 and 12, Chris Eubank Jr. is like, okay, Conor's picking up momentum and he's having momentum and success, especially at the kind of the mid-range where he's coming in and leaping in with these huge shots, and that's where he could kind of knock out Eubank Jr. And Eubank Jr. in round 11 kind of puts it back on him and he's like, you've just won a round, let me stick it back on you and take the round back off you, where Eubank Jr. pushes him and he's fighting in the pocket and he goes in close and he's teeing off at him, and it was an amazing round. Then we get to round 12, one of the best rounds I've ever seen in boxing history live. It was unbelievable, was this round. They come out and the one thing Ben's team was saying to him, there was like, he keeps push, because at this point Eubank was like, I'm fighting in the pocket and I'm just going to weigh on him and I'm going to drown him in the pocket and just win this fight there. And they're saying to him, he's just pushing you forward, step back and then land. But he couldn't. Eubank Jr. pushes him from the beginning of the 12th round back up against the rope, and he's just teeing off on Conor Benn, and he's not even letting him have an opening chance. He's not letting him kind of swing back at him. He is swinging back at him in the pocket, but in the pocket, it's like Conor Benn just can't generate that power, which can damage Eubank Jr., and Eubank Jr. is just suffocating him. He threw 112, was it 112 punches in this round? He threw 112 punches, it's showing on CompuBox in this round, and landed 57. He was swinging like mad in the pocket, and it was calculated. He was in the pocket fighting beautifully. He even stuns Conor Benn, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to knock him out in the 12th round. It was unbelievable. And Conor Benn swinging back with his own offense, and then they're just going hell for leather till the final bell is rung, and it goes all 12 rounds to the judges' scorecards. What an amazing fight. What an amazing 12th round. It was kind of Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. in those last two rounds, summoned something out of him that we've just never seen before in his career. There's many legendary fighters who go on to win world titles and do whatever, but this is the things you are remembered for, and this is his magnum opus, is Chris Eubank Jr. That last round where he put it all on the line. There's so many times where we're like, he never puts his foot on the trigger. He fights very safe. You go the Liam Williams fights. In the first 3-4 rounds, he's dropped him a few times and he coasts up until the 10th. This 12th round, when he needed to pull, something out the bag, Chris Eubank Jr. put his foot on the gas and was just smothering and smashing up Conor Benn in the inside and in the pocket. And he was landing beautifully. And he won it off the end of that fight. Chris Eubank Jr. won it. It was a tale of like ebbs and flows, this fight. Conor Benn starts off high, then comes down. Chris Eubank Jr. starts off low, comes back high, and then they meet in the middle where Chris Eubank Jr. is coming down, Conor Benn's coming up, and Conor Benn's in the ascendancy, and Chris Eubank Jr. is on the decline, and Conor Benn comes out in the 10th round, and it looks like he's dominating the fight, and then Chris Eubank Jr. just summoned something in those final two rounds where he ripped that fight back off Conor Benn. The judges' scorecards read, it's unanimous. All three judges had it 116-112. They had it in 4 rounds to the favour of Eubank Jr. I thought that was a bit harsh on Conor Benn. I thought Conor Benn, it was much closer than that. I don't think Conor Benn lost by 4 rounds. He lost by maybe 1 or 2 at the best, but if that fight was a draw, wouldn't have been fussed. It was such a good fight, such an entertaining fight. Both men delivered one of the fights of the ages. a lot of people are calling for the rematch. I'm at that point where I'm like, I don't even want to see that again. I don't think he could ever top that brilliance. I think the next fight just would never live up to the hype of this one. I think both guys should go their separate ways now. The legacy, the story, it's finished. The family feud is finished. I know Conor Benn will want that rematch because there's a lot of money in that rematch. There's a lot of storyline, and he's had his O taken from him. So he wants to avenge that, but man, the storyline, the Chris Eubank Jr. returning, the rivalry, the egg smashing, the drugs failures, everything that led up to this, it was just perfect. It was a perfect story, and it's been crescendoed, and I just don't think there's any point in ruining it by having a rematch. A lot of people want to see the rematch, and I get why, because that was a war, but these are the kind of wars Eddie Hearn alluded to, which said these are the kind of wars which are going to take years off Conor Benn's career. Conor Benn, he's either going to have the rematch because we've got the clause in place, or he should go back down to 147 and fight for the world title and become a champion and begin his career. I think he's going to learn so much about himself from this fight. To go up to 160 to fight a bigger guy, go all 12 rounds and throw hell for leather and just kind of show your own. Yeah, Chris Eubank Jr. had to kind of fight towards a weight restriction, but still, he went hell for leather for a bigger guy and put it all on the line. And a lot of people, including myself, wasn't fans of Conor Benn due to the PED usage. A lot of boxers weren't fans of him due to the PED usage and why he popped. And we've still never, there was a tweet from, I'm going to see if I can find it. There was a tweet from Adam Cattrall, which I actually really liked, where he talked about this fight. And he said something which I agreed with. Let me find it. Let me see if I can find it. It was to do with the weight miss. He goes, Eubank Jr. will pay $600k in fines for cracking an egg on his opponent and being 0.05 over in weight, while his opponent provided zero transparency for failing 2 PED tests and received no punishments. Obviously, he got suspended for 2 years out the ring, but that's normal. If you pop, you should be suspended because you shouldn't be taking any PEDs. But Chris Eubank Jr. was kind of painted out as the bad guy for missing weight, or he was made fun of by, Eddie Hearn and whatnot. But he deserves a lot of credit, for stepping up and showing up in this fight. And I think Conor Benn, he hasn't won all the fans over, like Eddie Hearn's alluding to. He's the people's champ, but he is a star off this fight. Everyone knows his name. Everyone's going to know his name in the British scene, and we can get behind him if he's actually, when you listen to him in interviews and whatnot, he's a very good kid and he's a humble kid, and he's made mistakes, I think, with this PED thing. I don't know what's happened, and maybe he never popped and it was something, but this is his chance to rebuild himself and become a champion in his own division. I think this is the rivalry finished, and I think both guys should move on to this. Chris Eubank Jr. is at the tail end of his career, and he should go look for a massive fight elsewhere. Conor Benn should go back to 147 and go win a world title there. But yeah, what an epic night of fight, Turki Al-Sheikh delivers again. And when the UFC is in turmoil at the minute, MMA is in turmoil at the minute, putting together John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. They're struggling to put on huge bouts and the biggest title fights and huge rivalries. Notoriously, MMA was brilliant at that. Seeing how boxing done it tonight in a stadium show at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which was amazing. The atmosphere was electric for the main event. Yeah, this just delivered on every single metric. It was one of the best fights of the year, one of the best fights I've ever seen. Just fantastic. Credit to Chris Eubank Jr. Parliamentary procedures, as he said would happen. I think it was a very close fight. I think overall he did deserve to win. I did have him. It was a draw or winning by 1 round or 1 or 2 rounds. It was a very, very close and competitive fight. And credit to Conor Benn. He showed out and put on a heck of a war. Was Conor Benn robbed, could you say? 4 rounds, that was very harsh. All judges had it the same, so maybe it wasn't robbery. They're the experts, are the judges. I know we have some terrible judging decisions over the years, but they're the experts. The other thing I want to say is some of the commentary was very, very biased towards Conor Benn. It wasn't the best listening. It was like when Conor Benn was coming in and landing these huge punches, they were like, oh my God, Conor Benn lands like crazy. But Eubank Jr. was doing brilliant steady work behind his jab and his own shots. So, yeah, just what an amazing fight. What an amazing rivalry. They lived up to their father's names, and that's the biggest thing. They lived up to their father's legacy. That's another huge feather in their cap. So credit to both gentlemen. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. Did you have Conor Benn winning? Did you have Chris Eubank Jr. winning? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. If you want me to cover more boxing content and make more boxing videos, I will more than happily do that. This was so much fun to do, especially because the storyline, the hype coming into it, every kind of interview that was coming out for this fight, I was watching it. I think this was just lightning in a bottle they caught, and it just so happened to deliver. But leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more MMA and fight content coming soon. We hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you in the next one.